Let me just start by acknowledging that we are in a difficult time. In Victoria, we have been going through a tunnel and thinking there was light at the end of the tunnel coming up. And, you know, I think we're all adjusting, even just in the last couple of days, with the news that the pandemic is not behind us. And, you know, I think I just want to start by acknowledging the difficulties with that, and that it's meant that we are continuing on this journey all together. And I think what it highlights is the importance of coming together, connecting with others in however form we can. And I just wanted to start by recognising that. I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're on. In my case, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I want to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and celebrate their 60,000 years of living sustainably on country, and the lessons that we have to tackle the climate crisis that we all face today. I also want to acknowledge at this time the ongoing tragedy that our First People remain the most disproportionately incarcerated people on the planet, and that the issue of sovereignty also remains unresolved. I think these are important points to make at this time, to keep an eye on the bigger picture and some of the challenges that we have ahead. Look, I'm honoured tonight to be joined on the panel by three thought leaders that have played a significant role in shaping social enterprise sector and catapulted beyond what might have been hoped for just a decade ago. I will stop sharing so that you may see their faces. I'm talking about Professor Joe Barraket, Director of Centre for Social Impact at Swinburne University, David Brookes, Managing Director of Social Traders, and Wade Noonan, Associate Director, Social Enterprise and Investment at RMIT University. If you could clap, you would make them feel welcome at this point. So let me start by explaining tonight's format. Conversation circles, futures now, that's what we're launching this evening. The format is intended to be, to invite a dialogue with your peers in the sector. We will hear from a panel this evening for the first half hour, and then we will have an hour for you to go into rooms with your peers and to go deeper into considering tonight's question. And tonight's question is, what role can the social enterprise sector play in the new economy? If we could mute microphones in the background, that would be great, thank you. The conversation circles, the format really aligns with the strategic priorities of CENVIC. One is to connect. So we're trying to create opportunities for practitioner-led dialogue and for collaboration and problem solving. Second, to strengthen the social enterprise community, to build a shared understanding of the features of a fair, inclusive and sustainable economy. And third, influence. CENVIC is here to be a voice for the sector. So through these conversation circles, we want to identify opportunities for social enterprise to shape the new economy today and accelerate our advocacy. The title Futures Now, the dissonance that provokes, is really a reflection of where we are now. There is so much disruption going on, and social enterprise has an opportunity to harness the unprecedented disruption caused by lockdown and activate the power of social enterprise to generate alternative futures now. We excel at social innovation. We excel at inspiring passion in people and reviving local communities. And that is the opportunity we have before us. So these conversation circles are not webinars, but they facilitate maximum participation and active learning by CENVIC members. So what's CENVIC view of the question, the role that social enterprise can play in the new economy? Tonight on our website, CENVIC is launching our new strategic plan. And what we're doing in that is that it reflects the relevance of this historical moment. The new strategy reflects our strong strategic insights for optimal influence, our accelerated activities and ambition, and the strong leadership that social enterprise community deserves. A key part of the strategy is unpacking what are the characteristics of a thriving social enterprise sector. And here comes further technical delays as I try to bring it up, but no, let me go to it. Sorry, just bear with me. So we say a thriving social enterprise sector is one that is a leader in the new economy, that prioritises people and the planet. We practice fair, sustainable and inclusive business, and we are supported by an enabling institutional environment. So that's about the finance, law and regulation around us that support us have a thriving ecosystem. To achieve our vision of a fair, sustainable and inclusive economy, we seek to role model integrity, equity and transparency in business, strong local place-based economies, shared economic prosperity and power, an ecologically sustainable economy, catalytic creativity and collaboration in the marketplace, and self-determination and justice for First Peoples. Now, these elements are not for everybody. We are a broad church. Individually, we may role model ecological sustainability, but not inclusive employment. We must, some of us look for opportunities to catalyse transformative change, and for others, we're about strong local place-based economies. But collectively, these characteristics define our values and behaviours. Individually, we play a part, and at this historic realignment of government and its role supporting economic recovery, it is critical we work together to shape the social enterprise community in Victoria. And CENVIC is here to give voice to the sector because the whole of the sector is greater than the sum of our parts. So tonight, when we go into a dialogue around what is a new economy and what social enterprise does, we know that we punch above our weight. We know that we actually, I'll throw that, I don't like that one. We know that we are not on the same playing field as mainstream business. We are certainly not on the same, we're not on the same ground as the charity sector and welfare. And for too long, social enterprise has been frustrated by the way that we have binary approaches from government in policy settings, that one is either business or one is either charity and welfare. That frustrates us, it disrupts us, it makes success difficult for social enterprise. So we know through, and what we'll hear, I think from the other speakers tonight, is those areas where we have demonstrated our ability to provide impact beyond the ordinary government activities and beyond business as usual. And what is at the heart of our advocacy point here is that we are entitled to a competitive advantage. We are entitled and we expect preferential treatment because we do play on a different field to the rest of business and the rest of the public service. But it's not the league below, as we are often made to feel. We're made to feel that we're perhaps too community oriented and we're in this little league. We are not that. We are not the league below. We are the league above. And that is the mindset that we need to go forward as we consider what is our role in the new economy. We are the league above, and we deserve that recognition from the environment around us, the regulatory settings, from finance and what they offer in terms of patient finance or impact investment. Government should be looking for opportunities in the next social enterprise strategy to find ways to accelerate what has been recognised and done to date, so that social enterprise is understood by mainstream public servants from the executive down to the procurement officers. So that's my call to action tonight, is that each of you is here to become an advocate for the sector. I've gone over time, perhaps partly due to the technical issues, or partly because I feel like I'm in a little closet by myself. So let me pass the baton on to Professor Jo Barraket to speak about her perspective on the question, and we'll go through the panel in turn, and hopefully we've got time for a follow-up question for all of us from the panel. So thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And I acknowledge that I'm also on Wurundjeri land and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. Thanks for having me here and noting Senvik's very righteous position on practitioner-led voice. I'm an academic. Many of you I know, a few of you I don't, but I'm a pracademic. I'm, among other things, the deputy chair of series and have started a couple of social enterprises myself. It's actually a great source of pride that the University of New South Wales Student Food Cooperative is still going 28 years after I started it. I'm going to try and keep it brief because I really don't think you need academic voices. But what I was asked to do was speak to the research evidence on the questions of the role of social enterprise in the new economy. I acknowledge I've actually done about 6 webinars on this topic in the last 8 weeks, and some of you have been on some of those. So I'm going to try not to repeat myself and just stick to 3 key points. But before I do that, just want to say that, you know, the concept of the new economy itself, I think Nick very clearly articulated Senvik's vision for what the new economy looks like. And I just wanted to note, while I don't disagree with it, it certainly is a dominant perspective on new economy and new economic thinking. There is actually an earlier iteration of new economy which emphasised tech-enabled economic growth, a knowledge-rich society, but with a very strong focus on high growth. And I think that's one of the things we need to be clear about when we're using terminology and positioning ourselves, is what do we mean, and what are your perspectives collectively on growth? Because in the visions of new economy that Nick articulated, there is actually a sort of a subliminal debate. It's sometimes left under the carpet about whether you're about degrowth, post-growth, or inclusive growth. And I'm not going to spend my time defining terms, but I think just the question of growth is actually itself an important one. I guess the other point to make about definitions, etc., is I think, you know, obviously new economy right now is highly aspirational if we're looking at the vision that Senvik has set out, and we need to think about that in the context of our current economic reality, which includes, you know, unprecedented levels of unemployment, deepening inequality, and in the employment realm for those who were already behind the 8 ball, which are women, people with disability, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, refugees and people seeking asylum, and young people. They're way more behind the 8 ball than they were just 8 weeks ago. And also, of course, we're operating within ecological crisis. So, you know, I think you know, there's plenty of good social entrepreneurs on this call who'll be up for all of those things, and you know, the optimism and ingenuity of you all will come together. But I do think we need to acknowledge where we are. So in terms of the role of social enterprise in responding to the positive vision of the new economy, which is where I think we're locating this discussion. Just picking up on a few things Nick said, I think building and modelling inclusive economy is a really important part of it. And only about 1/3 of social enterprises in Australia actually are explicitly focused on employment creation. Of course, a good many more of the 20,000 do actually create employment, but what I mean is about 7,000 of them identify as being work integration social enterprises. So employment's the principal reason for being, and employment for people who are experiencing disadvantage in particular. And the research that we did for the Victorian government showed quite clearly that, you know, social enterprises are, I don't want to use the terminology punching above their weight either, but overperforming relative to their commercial counterparts on employing people with disability. So about double the rate of participation in social enterprises compared to other small to medium enterprises. That half of social enterprises in Victoria are led by women, although that is at the level of management. When you get into governance, you see dominance of men again. But we do see these traits of what looks like a more inclusive economy and inclusive employment model within social enterprises. I think the area where we've slipped in Australia, and I've mentioned this in a couple of other webinars, so apologies for being repetitive, is around diverse and inclusive ownership and governance. And I think that that's something that I would challenge social enterprises in Australia to think a little bit more about, is, whose voices are at the table in the governance of your organisations, who, if there is any individual benefit to ownership, who is receiving that, but of course recognising that ownership carries risks, and there's very real reasons why people experiencing particular kinds of disadvantage might not want to take the risk of ownership on. The next area I think is in the social innovation space, innovation in products and services, but also innovation in business models. And I think you guys have got that in spades, and there's been some very clear, concrete examples of the capacity to, Rob Pekin says I can't say pivot, I have to say, clear examples of you pirouetting over the last 3 months. I think that, there's quite a lot in that that's important, not just for social enterprise and the social economy, but also for the mainstream economy. There's also innovation in processes that many of your organisations adopt, although acknowledging what Nick said, you're not all the same model and you're not all trying to achieve the same things. But there's good examples of circular economic solutions in social enterprise business models. There's good examples of crowdsourced responses to developing new goods and services for communities and demographic groups that are really excluded by mainstream product developers. And all of that's really important. And then the final thing is the voice for systems change. And, I think obviously tonight's launching a statement from a strategic position from Senvic, and there's also the work that all the state-based networks have done to come together. And that's really critically important, because I think it's been, I guess, the missing piece, I would say, is a coordinated voice and recognising that you're in the business of systems change. So the available research actually tells us that social entrepreneurs aren't very actively involved in political advocacy. Now that makes complete sense to me, because why would you do that? You're too busy running the shop, usually in undercapitalised situations, etc. But if the kinds of systemic changes you want to see are to occur, there needs to be that coordinated voice, and I think that's really important. And the very final bit is the evidence. And, I'm obviously a significant producer of the evidence. CSI Swinburne's the largest social enterprise research centre in the world. And we're very active in that space. But I can't go into any discussions with government or philanthropy or impact investors and not hear, the question, where's the evidence? We're here to support with that. There are many others. It's not an empire that we're building, but we'll be talking with you and with Senvic and others over the next few months. I think realistically what we've been trying to do is give you all a breather, because frankly you've had bigger fish to fry. But it's really going to be quite important, I think, for some of your collective aspirations, that you've got the evidence base you need to prosecute your arguments. So I won't speak anymore. I will pass over to David.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks,
David. Do you want to go ahead?
Look, I like this topic, this question that's being posed, and I don't necessarily like speaking after Joe Barraket though, and sandwiched in between Joe and Wade, two very highly regarded leaders and in this space. But as you know, I've been closely associated with the sector now over the last decade and more, and it's great to have this opportunity. And Nick asked me, obviously, in inviting me to be part of this tonight, to respond to the question, what role can SE play, social enterprise play in the new economy, but also just to maybe share some some comments around, social traders sort of work, around advocacy and social procurement, which I'd like to sort of share with you tonight. So first some thoughts on, I've got some notes that I've scribbled down here, so please sort of excuse me sort of referring to these. But I'll make some comments first on social enterprise and the new economy, and then talk a little bit about, where I see the sort of social procurement work of social traders going over the next 5 to 10 years as well. But what I think, obviously for me, and I think probably here we're speaking to the converted around social enterprise and the new economy. But for me, social enterprise, is a manifestation of what the new economy should look like. We know, and Joe has talked about this. Social enterprise uses different types of business models to address a really broad and diverse range of social and economic and cultural and environmental issues. And they really, as we all know, I think sort of bring that, innovative, bring innovative and sustainable approaches that are not being addressed by, the market economy, by the free market economy. They bring, alternative and tailored responses, for sections of our community that are vulnerable and marginalised, through and fall through sort of government, safety nets and community programs. And, we have seen, through the GFC almost 10 years ago, the failure of the financial markets, this current sort of COVID-19 shutdown of the economy. I think, these are putting a spotlight on, some of the weaknesses and failures of our, of our current sort of model of our current economy, and the shift to a more sort of globalised trading and financial sort of market system. And clearly, there have been lots of winners, through that shift. But we also, well know that there have been many that have, that have been losers and have been marginalised. And so, the economy as we know it, is not working as well as we'd like it. And, there needs to be, clearly a rebalancing. And social enterprise can, and I believe will be a really important part of this transition. The economic recovery, from COVID-19, I think presents a really huge opportunity for social enterprise that we really haven't sort of seen before. The recession, I think, will be longer and deeper than what we've ever seen, probably since the Great Depression. Australia may not be as badly affected as other parts of the world, but I think the levels of, unemployment and, exclusion that we find ourselves, the society finds itself over the next 6, 12, 18 months, 2 years will be quite severe. And, those social enterprises are organisations that are really purpose-built, for the challenges that we're going to experience through the recovery, and getting those most vulnerable people, in society into work, and also giving, people and community groups access to, to the services that they need. So the need for, for social enterprise as part of the solution and the economic recovery is stronger more than ever in my view. I think social enterprise was on the rise, pre-COVID, but I believe, it'll really sort of take off as a tangible and practical and proven solution, post the crisis as we go into the recovery phase. I think just in terms of social enterprises, again, we all know that social enterprises are businesses They need similar recognition and support. Most of them are small businesses, small, medium-sized businesses. They need access to support, financial, the right sort of finance and access to customers and markets. And as many people have, on the call this evening will know, Social Traders made a decision about 3 years ago to focus around one of those key elements around, facilitating access to procurement opportunities for social enterprises. We believe, that access to procurement, access to customers is actually the biggest lever to support the growth of social enterprises. And we're making sort of some good progress and track record, some good progress in that area. But having said that, we're at the start of, of a journey, and we're making good progress. I think for a few reasons. One is I think the role of government and business is absolutely critical. I think we have seen some leadership here in Victoria. Having said that, we were up until quite recently operating in a policy vacuum, but with the Victorian Social Enterprise Strategy, with the first state adopting that focus around social enterprise in 2017, that was really a game changer. Queensland government following in the last 12 months. But we've still not got, a national social enterprise sort of focus or strategy, or with other states. So, but, we are making some good progress here in Victoria and in other states, but more progress here in Victoria because we've got that supportive sort of leadership and policy framework here in Victoria. That's not to say, we've completed our job here in Victoria. We've got a long way to go. But we are in the early stages of creating this social enterprise marketplace here in Australia, and Social Traders is part of providing that sort of facilitative role, connecting enterprises up with government and business buyers. We've in the first 2 years, in FY18 and 20, we facilitated over $100 million of deals for social enterprises. We think that's the tip of the iceberg, and we haven't got the figures for this latest year, but I think that figure will double, in this latest FY20 period. I think also, we have to recognise the role of business and not treat them as a foe or as an enemy. We're really, I think, starting to get in good engagement with the business sector. We've got over 80 buyer members as part of our community. A number of those businesses are at different stages of engaging with social enterprises, some more progressive than others, but a number of those are actually setting targets for engaging social enterprises in their supply chain. SAP, global company, Social Traders is just about to announce a partnership with SAP. Have set a 5% social procurement target. Companies like Mirvac have got social enterprise or social procurement targets. In a lot of ways it's early days, but we as a sector have to work with government and have to work with business as part of a bigger economy. And we know employees in those governments and in the government departments and in those businesses want their organisations to be sort of socially responsible. And as they learn and understand about social enterprises, they want to be engaging and buying from social enterprises as part of their procurement. I'm going to hand over to Wade very shortly, but the other thing I just wanted to touch on is that Social Traders has got really big plans for the next 5 to 10 years. As I say, we've made a really good start here in Victoria. We've got a really good model, and we want to scale that, and we want to take that nationally, working with the other states and also with the federal government. We've used actually COVID-19 as a really, as I say, as an opportunity to ramp up and accelerate our engagement with the federal government, and have been having some really positive discussions with the National COVID Coordination Commission in the last 2 or 3 weeks around social procurement and the power of government using their huge spending power and their spending power around economic stimulus, to engage social enterprises, to make social enterprises or include social enterprises in some of those, economic stimulus packages. And so we haven't got that over the line, but we have a big advocacy agenda, and we, very keen, I think, to work, with Joe, with the CSI, with Victorian government, and also with the networks around, that sort of bigger, advocacy agenda at state and national level. We are suggesting, recommending to the federal government that they incorporate a 1%, target for spending with social enterprises as part of their economic stimulus spending, which in terms of infrastructure and construction is in the billions of dollars. But if you take even a very small portion of that, it opens up huge opportunities, for existing social enterprises to grow, and also for new social enterprises, to start up and to take advantage of some of those opportunities. In closing, look, I would say that, I think we need, as a sector, to be really ambitious. We need to have a voice. It's important, obviously, for us to have a voice that there is a receptive policy environment. And so the role, as I say, of government is really important. But we have to be concerted in our approach. We also have to be patient and persistent, because these things do take time. We need to, I think, leverage the passion and commitment of our young people, because I think young people, the millennials, the Z generation, are really onto this, and I think there's huge opportunity, for us to engage with the, more with the young people in our society, to really sort of take this forward over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think we do need to be taking sort of a long-term view around this. Let's be ambitious, but let's do that in a really sort of measured and considered and appropriate way that engages, government, engages the public and the private sector, so that we, can really provide, much more, equitable opportunities for, for everyone across our society and communities. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Wade Noonan.
Thanks, David. Wade?
Oh, look, thanks, Nick. Nice to see you out of a blue polo shirt into a blue business shirt. I've got visions of your wardrobe now as being all blue. So thank you for the invitation to be involved, and well done to Senvic for not only hosting this series, but also on your strategic plan. Can I also recognise David and Joe? David, of course, is finishing up with Social Traders in the second half of the year, which will leave a hole, I think, a hole for someone to fill, no doubt. But I want to acknowledge his pioneering efforts, not just here in Victoria or Australia, but globally, and also Joe for her thought leadership and leading research as well. It's terrific to not only join those two and you, but to look around the screen and see the calibre of leaders that we have here, particularly in Victoria. It's clear that is a major factor in terms of why Victoria is such a leading light in relation to social enterprises, again, not just here in Australia, but around the world. So thank you for the opportunity. Look, I think we've come a long way, and sometimes it's important to stop and acknowledge why that happens, and recognise that it is difficult at the moment, but there are some positive green shoots sort of appearing everywhere. And the emergence of Senvic, of course, has happened as a result of Victoria leading the way with the first social enterprise strategy. Now, I was very fortunate to be serving in government at the time when this strategy was released. but the success of the strategy was led by the fact that the sector created and co-designed the strategy. It wasn't something that was created inside government and presented in such a way that it wasn't going to have an impact. And Sen Vic, if you like, was one of the key recommendations in the report to be created to build, if you like, the level of networking and capacity or capability of the sector as well. And when we talk about social procurement, we often, unless you've been close to this sector, people don't recognise necessarily that one of the recommendations that came out of the social enterprise strategy was for the Victorian government to use its purchasing power. And so a year later, the social procurement framework came along, which has actually helped other parts of the social impact sector, such as Aboriginal businesses, disability businesses, and other opportunities as well. So the social enterprise sector has actually really led the way, and I think that needs to be recognised and acknowledged. I think there are other positives as well, and whilst I won't borrow, the research, I'd say we all recognise anecdotally that there are very strong trends amongst consumers, amongst government, and amongst industry to choose more ethical, environmental, and social purchasing options. And I think that is happening because the community is expecting it to happen. So businesses and government are very conscious of their brand in these three areas. And I think the social purchasing side is the emerging area following other areas. So if I reflect on my time working in government, I think what we're seeing is a redefinition of the way value for money is considered. No longer is it about sort of the best price and the best product. It's really about what is the social impact that gets created by going in a particular direction or awarding a contract in a particular way. And I think that's a very positive thing. And we're not just seeing it in government, of course. We're seeing it in lots of areas, greener energy, ethically made clothing, a lot of consumer goods that we're seeing on our grocery shelves. It goes on and on. So I think it is a trend, and it's a reason for optimism in relation to the future of social enterprises. I think probably COVID-19, and there's been a little bit of a discussion about that, and I'm sure it will continue, but I think it'll generate a stronger buy local approach amongst the community and force countries, including Australia, to be less reliant on importing things it needs, but it doesn't actually make. And I think that creates an opportunity for the social enterprise sector. And I think the sector is getting stronger. It takes a long time, some would argue 20 to 30 years, to be an overnight success. But as I've listened to Joe and David talk about sort of the journey and the work that's been done, there are lots of new entrants now in this sector, which is helping build the capability of the sector. It's not to suggest for a moment that there is not additional work to be done, but the sorts of things that are starting to emerge in the social enterprise sector were not happening even 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm sure there are many examples that you draw on yourself. Of course, there are some challenges, and Joe and David have stepped through. I think, there is still a broader question about what people understand out there to be a social enterprise. I think whilst there is an increasing appreciation and understanding, I think if people actually understand what social enterprise is and they're given a choice to purchase a good or a service from a social enterprise versus another business which is not a social enterprise, most reasonable-minded people will actually purchase from an enterprise that exists for a purpose. I think the challenge is, how do you improve the brand, if you like, of what social enterprises actually are, and how do you protect the brand so that there is not, in a sense, those that will call themselves a social enterprise but actually really don't exist for a purpose. So that's a bit of a challenge. I think David and Joe have both referenced this in different ways. There is plenty of evidence around about the value of social enterprises, But I think there needs to be a really strong discipline about telling the story of social enterprises in every forum available. So the evidence is there, but telling the human story will be increasingly important in lots of different forums, whether that's sitting around board tables with big business who are using social enterprises for the first time, whether that's going back to talk to a new minister, because there's probably been a couple since I was there. That's just the nature of the way the world works. And it is in other states and jurisdictions where we will continue to build the presence of social enterprises. I think there's also a challenge, whilst we'd like to maintain these targets around individual projects and governments spending in a particular area, we've got to be thinking about where are the capability gaps where big projects exist, where they want to spend with social enterprises, but social enterprises don't actually exist in those spaces yet. I think that's something to keep an eye on. And clearly when we're talking to, for example, government or the private sector, we've got to be thinking about how we can build the capability of the sector, not just the purchasing from the sector, if you like. I'm not going to add too much more, but I just want to say, when I was preparing for tonight, I looked back at the 2017 strategy here in Victoria. I think the three key areas of focus, increasing impact and innovation, building business capacity and skills, and improving market access, I think they hold true still. I think, if we were looking at a next strategy, for example, to be released next year, I don't think we would throw those areas out. I think that they still remain areas of focus that we should continue to maintain in our work to maintain a relevant 2021 strategy. The one thing I did want to throw into the conversation tonight is how do we embed social purchasing and social enterprises and maintain Victoria's leading position, particularly when it comes to social enterprises. I want to draw on the local procurement of goods and services that were made law here in 2018 in a bill that passed, which sees 90% minimum content being used on construction projects. So, typically technology that's used, all of the technical sides, all of the products that go into construction projects, and I'm not an engineer, but all of what we are seeing is about supporting local businesses and creating local jobs by essentially giving some advantage to the local sector here in Australia and New Zealand around procurement. And we've seen the creation of a local jobs first commissioner here in Victoria to keep a level of compliance and support that to actually happen. I'd like to think that by 2025, when we're thinking about 2021 and the next strategy, I'd like to think that we could get the sector through the social procurement here in Victoria to make a strong argument to in fact embed social procurement into law here in Victoria such that it will survive governments coming and going. Because the worst thing that could happen to the sector here in Victoria is that a Victorian government, for example, would walk away from social procurement because some who procure services and build things and take on contracts would say it's all a bit too hard to do this and the sector doesn't have the capability to respond in a way that we need it. So I would like to think that we would be ambitious in our desire to see the growth and capability of the sector happen by essentially ensuring that by 2025 we would have some legislation here in Victoria which would incorporate the social purchasing aspect of the awarding of contracts, if you like, by government, which anything over $20 million has to have social procurement targets in it, that we use that as leverage also to see some further investment into the sector here in Victoria. And of course, if we maintain that leadership position, we will continue to pave the way for other jurisdictions here in Australia and hopefully maintain a leadership across the globe. So, Nick, with that, thanks for the opportunity to have some input.
Thanks, Wade. And look, thanks everybody tonight. I think it's been really interesting getting your different perspectives and certainly exciting to see the leadership we still have in the social enterprise sector here. I think we've been very lucky to hear from you three tonight. And Before we move into groups, I just want to let people know that, of course, we have a survey at the moment that the Victorian Government has opened for social enterprises to contribute to, which goes to the heart of this conversation about what we want to see in the next social enterprise strategy and what we think of the 2017 social enterprise strategy, which we've had already some comments on tonight. So please check out the Centre Vic homepage if you're going to leave us soon, and make sure you add your voice to that consultation that KPMG are doing on behalf of the Victorian Government. We don't have time for another round of questions, but I just want to say thank you, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. And for those, and I'll just do a round of applause for everybody. Thank you. So you're going to be invited to join a breakout room shortly. But we'll say goodnight to our panel now. We are going to collate the discussions that you have in your small rooms, and we'll circulate that so you'll hear what others discussed, and all attendees will get a glimpse into what your conversations were.